Former head of the Luhansk Military Civil Administration, former Deputy Minister for Temporarily Occupied Territories and Internally Displaced Persons, Georgy Tuka commented on the probable scenario of a change of power in the Kremlin. "I would not exaggerate Putin's sole role in current events. After all, after 25 years, this regime has built a collective Putin, who, of course, is not homogeneous. There is still competition for influence on decision-making and for access to the feeding troughs," he emphasized in a comment to Glavred. The expert believes that the current elites in the Russian Federation, if necessary, will find a replacement for Putin. But all of them are now united not by the physical figure of Putin, so if they find an alternative to Putin, the replacement will occur absolutely painlessly. But Moscow's policy towards Ukraine and the war will not undergo any changes. Under Putin, this policy will not change 100%, but even after him, the chance of the appearance of a person who will smoothly begin to turn the ship of the current ideology, which has swallowed up all of Russian society, is quite insignificant, and this process will last a very long time, Tuka added. Earlier it was reported that Putin suddenly started talking about his successor and candidates. The Russian dictator noted that there could be several candidates so that the people have a choice. The topic of a successor has been taboo in Russian politics for quite some time, and the previous presidential elections, March 2024, seemed to put an end to this issue. However, a situation has developed in Russia in which the taboo on a successor has not prevented the elites from actually living in the logic of the transition of power. Let us recall that famous TV presenter Savik Shuster previously announced the timing of Putin's death and spoke about his successors. Immediately after Vladimir Putin's death, a fight for power will begin in the Russian Federation. Says Savik Shuster, there are two groups. Patrushev's group is aggressive. It is connected with the FSB, but what is important, Professor Solovey emphasized, is that this group has reached a consensus with the Federal Security Service. And this is very important, because the Federal Security Service, as they say, controls the doubles, Shuster noted. At the same time, according to him, the second group is Sergei Chemezov, who is a person very close to Putin. They met in Dresden. He is also a KGB man, and Putin always put him in very important positions. Now he heads Rostec, deals with sales and development of weapons. Head of the state company Rosneft, Igor Sechin, will also be in it, as Professor Solovey said. And these two groups will clash in the struggle for power. Maybe they will come to an agreement at first, but then there will still be a clash. It is unlikely that Chemezov, who is already an old man, and Patrushev will nominate themselves for president, but they would certainly like to remain grey cardinals. This is basically the most important thing, Shuster said.
The Ukrainian Air Force has carried out a strike on a house in the Tyatkino settlement of Russia's Kursk region, where Russian military personnel were gathered. The house was destroyed by an AASM-250 Hammer air bomb of French origin, and the soldiers inside were eliminated. Additionally, occupying troops who had gathered in several partially destroyed buildings in the occupied part of Zaporizhia region were detected and targeted. Airstrikes using Western-made bombs destroyed the buildings and eliminated the assault groups present in the area. It should be noted that Ukrainian airstrikes on Russian military positions in occupied territories, as well as in Russia's border regions, have intensified. These strikes, primarily using AASM-250 Hammer bombs and US-made GBU air bombs, have resulted in the destruction of a significant number of Russian troops and military equipment. Ukraine will continue to destroy the enemy and do everything to move the war to Russian territory. Preparations are currently underway for new strikes deep into Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reported the relevant information. He also spoke about the current situation on the front and the Russians' plans. How is Ukraine preparing a response to Russia? The President of Ukraine held a meeting with Rustem Umerov, Oleksandr Swarsky, and Andriy Natov. Together with the Minister of Defense and the military, they discussed the situation on the main front lines. In particular, the conversation concerned the Pokrovsky and Novopavlivsky directions, as well as the Zaporizhia, Kharkiv, and Sumy regions. At present, the intentions and attempts to develop offensive actions by the enemy are being recorded. The Russian army has fallen significantly behind its command's expectations for this summer. Our units will continue to destroy the occupier and do everything to transfer the war to Russian territory. We are preparing our new long-range strikes, the message says. Among its recent attacks far from the front line, Ukraine targeted military airfields housing strategic bombers in several Russian regions last month. The EU has allocated hundreds of billions of euros in recent months to expand its military-industrial complex and support Ukraine's domestic weapons production. Berlin will provide Ukraine its first batch of long-range missiles financed by Germany in the coming weeks, Major General Christian Freuding, who oversees the coordination of the country's military support for Kiev, has said. U.S. President Donald Trump said earlier this week that the Pentagon will resume deliveries to Kiev, following weeks of suspension, and is reportedly considering approving the first new aid package since returning to office. Russia has said that it views the use of foreign-supplied missiles as direct participation by Western states in the conflict, and claimed that Ukrainian troops cannot operate sophisticated weapon systems on their own. South Korea's military intelligence agencies have reported that North Korea may have delivered over 12,152mm artillery shells to Russia in support of its war against Ukraine. A report by the Defense Intelligence Agency shows information that North Korea has provided Russia with around 28,000 containers containing weapons and artillery ammunition. If calculated with 152mm single shells, are presumed to have reached more than 12 million, the Defense Intelligence Agency said. Last year, North Korea sent 11,000 soldiers to support Russia's war in Ukraine, followed by an additional 3,000 this year. The troops supported Moscow's counteroffensive in Kursk, a western Russian region where Kiev troops launched a surprise incursion last August and suffered heavy casualties, according to reports. In late June, South Korea's intelligence agency claimed that North Korea is likely to send more troops to Russia in the next 2 months. North Korea deployed thousands of soldiers to aid Russia in the Ukraine war following the signing of a strategic partnership treaty by leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Pyongyang in June 2024. In April, South Korea's spy agency claimed that North Korea likely suffered 4,700 casualties while fighting alongside Russian forces in the Russia-Ukraine war, with 600 confirmed fatalities. Ukrainian military intelligence chief Kirill Budanov told Bloomberg that North Korea may now be covering as much as 40% of Russia's ammunition needs for the war. Budanov also confirmed that Pyongyang is providing other advanced weaponry, including ballistic missiles and artillery systems, which he described as good weapons. Russia and North Korea have been deepening bilateral ties amid international scrutiny. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov visited Pyongyang last week and said North Korea has reaffirmed its clear support for Russia's war in Ukraine and the Kremlin's leadership, reported South Korean news agency Yonhap. In return, Russia is reportedly providing North Korea with financial support and technology, helping Kim Jong-un's regime to mitigate the effects of international isolation.